they have waxed worse and worse. In fact, God refers to them as worse than the heathen. God never breaks his covenant with Israel, and that's a type of eternal security. So through Christ, he never breaks his covenant with us, even though some of the Christians have become as bad or worse than the heathen, which is a glorious, wonderful thing for us, that he never leaves us nor forsakes us. The same was true when he made his covenant with Abraham and his seed, and David and his seed. And it's still true today that very shortly in the future he will bless Israel and make them the #1 nation in the world. Hard to believe right now. You read the newspapers, they just had a bad earthquake in Turkey, and it affected things in Israel. But Israel is in a lot of trouble right now politically, and with Iran, and with the nuclear threats and all of that stuff. And that's a different subject. But God one day soon will set his son Jesus Christ on the throne at the second advent, and he will come and build the millennial temple in Jerusalem. Been there, seen that, not the temple, but the place where it's going to be built. And he will reign over the nation of Israel, and they will be #1 nation in the world. I believe that with all my heart. I teach that unashamedly. And we're studying right now a portion of their history, which is probably the worst time. Well, it's hard to say. They've had so many bad times, and they got one yet to come, the tribulation. But this is when Jeremiah, good prophet, told them over and over and over and over again. If you've ever pastored, you know how it goes. You tell your church, you tell your congregation, you warn your people, and doesn't seem, in some people, doesn't seem to make much difference. They go and engage themselves in sin, and they get in trouble, and then they come crying, "Oh, woe is me." And you say, "Well, I told you so. Don't do that. Don't ever do it again." And they go out and they do it again. And they come and say, "Oh, woe is me." Well, that's what's going on in Jerusalem right now. And Jeremiah tells them here in verse 10, 29:10, "For thus saith the Lord, that after 70 years be accomplished at Babylon, I will visit you and perform my good word toward you in causing you to return to this place." So Jeremiah warns them. Look in Jeremiah chapter 12, verse 25, verse 12. Chapter 25, verse 12. 25, 11 and 12. Chapter 25, 11 and 12. "And this whole land shall be a desolation and an astonishment, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years, verse 12. "And it shall come to pass when 70 years are accomplished that I will punish the king of Babylon, and that nation, saith the Lord, for their iniquity." All right, Jeremiah warns them in another place. He said, "Look, you're going into captivity. If you don't like that, tough apples, because you're going anyway. I put up with you. I put up with you. You have failed. You have done everything wrong, just like the heathen." In fact, in one case, God refers to Jerusalem as Sodom and Gomorrah. They're just every wicked thing you can imagine. And yet, once again, he never breaks his covenant, and it's not broken today, even though they killed his son, the Lord Jesus Christ. And so that's wonderful doctrine there. But Jeremiah says, you're going to go into captivity in Babylon. Jeremiah says the best thing you can do is to walk out the gates of Jerusalem when the king of Babylon comes and surrender. Well, nobody wanted to do that, including the king Zedekiah. And so they didn't. Now, Jeremiah says, look in chapter 40. Jeremiah says, if you do that, if you surrender, then the city of Jerusalem and the temple will be spared. They thought the temple was great. It was one of the, this is Solomon's temple, and it was one of the, bye-bye, have a good time. It was one of the 7 wonders of the world, Solomon's temple. And I've got a picture of it here. I took this picture of it. No, I'm joking. I was there, but they didn't have cameras back then. No, this is 600 years before Jesus is born, and the temple is magnificent. There's been estimates that the value of the gold and the temple and the things that are in it and all of the furniture and the vessels and everything, it's been estimated in today's values to be $500 billion.
$500 billion.
You got million, you got billion. A billion is 1,000 millions, and a trillion is 1,000 billions. So you've got $500 billion worth of gold and structures in that temple. But the point I want to make today, one of the points, is that doesn't impress God. That doesn't, with us, we say, oh, that temple's, it's so valuable. And many people would give their life in protection of that temple. When you don't do right inside of a $500 billion building, God's concerned about your heart, but he's not concerned about the building. Wipe it off the face of the earth. And he did. He allowed that to be taken off the face of the earth. And everybody's standing there gasping. And that's what we're studying today, the response of the people to the destruction of the city and all the rich houses and the palace of the king and the temple. And they just can't believe it. Look a few verses here in chapter 40 and verse 1, the word that came of Jeremiah from the Lord after that Nebuchadnezzar, the captain of the guard, had let him go from Ramah, when he had taken him being bound in chains among all that were carried away captive of Jerusalem and Judea, which were carried away captive unto Babylon. And the captain of the guard took Jeremiah and said unto him, the Lord thy God hath pronounced this evil upon this place, and the Lord hath brought it and done according as he hath said, because ye have sinned against the Lord and have not obeyed his voice. Therefore this thing is come upon you. What thing? The destruction of Jerusalem and all of the precious places and everything, and the thousands and thousands of people that were killed as a result of it. And here is a heathen captain of the guard that knows that, I'm sorry, I pronounced it wrong. I knew it was wrong. Nebuzaradan. He's the captain of the guard for Nebuchadnezzar. And he knows that God is bringing this destruction, even though he's doing it. He's actually breaking down the temple. Even though he's doing it, he knows that this is of God because of their sin. And he is destroying and ruining the temple. Not only that, got a couple pictures here, but look at that. Destruction of Jerusalem. He also knows that Jeremiah is a prophet. He is a heathen captain of the guard, and he knows Jeremiah by name, and he knows Jeremiah prophesied this, and he knows that Jeremiah is the one that prophesied everything that's happening, and so he decides to give Jeremiah his freedom. And Jeremiah says, I would rather stay with the people. If you had a chance to leave that and go away, my. And Jeremiah said, no, I'll stay with the preacher. I'll stay with the people. And so he is crying. He is the weeping prophet. He wrote the book of Lamentations, cryings over what? Over the people's sin, over the destruction of Jerusalem, over the killing of the people because of their sin. Lamentation. That's what Lamentations is all about. Now go to Jeremiah chapter 51, and we have some details here concerning the destruction of Babylon. And I mean, they did a good job. Jeremiah 52. Jeremiah 52. And look in verse 3. For through the anger of the Lord came to pass in Jerusalem, Judah, till he had cast them out from his presence, that Zedekiah, that's the last king of Judah, rebelled against the king of Babylon. It came to pass in the 9th year of his reign, in the 10th month and 10th day of the month, that Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came, he and all his army, against Jerusalem, pitched against it, and built forts against it round about the city. So the city was besieged. That is, the whole army of Nebuchadnezzar is around it. Nobody goes or comes without their permission. So there's no food coming in, and no provisions, no medication, nobody, no camel trains can have any business in the city while it's being besieged by Babylon. And looking down in verse 13, and burned the house of the Lord, that's the temple, and the king's house, and all the houses of Jerusalem, and all the houses of the great men burned he with fire, and all the army of the Chaldeans, that's Babylonians, that were with the captain of the guard, break down all the walls of Jerusalem round about. Now you just think about how much work is involved in breaking down. Look at the wall. Look there. You're gonna break that down. Is it easier to build, or is it easier to break it down? I don't know which one's more difficult. So they really did a job on Jerusalem. Of course, the sorrow and the pain and the suffering. Look in verse 16. And Nebuchadnezzar, captain of the guard, left certain of the poor of the land for vine dressers and for husbandmen, also the pillars of brass that were in the house of the Lord, and the bases and the brazen sea. That's what Solomon made. That was in the house of the Lord. The Chaldeans break and carried all the brass of them to Babylon. So all of this stuff, you go on down, the rest of this chapter is on the destruction of Jerusalem. Look in verse 27. Thus Judah was carried away captive out of his own land. Now, it's true that Babylon came in, besieged Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, and three times, important to know, 3 times Nebuchadnezzar took captive people from Jerusalem. Why 3 times? The first time he took all of the brains. He took, and Daniel was in that first group, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were of royal blood. Daniel was one of the most brilliant men living on earth at that time. Babylon was an expanding empire. In fact, it ruled the world, and it was always conquering new countries and peoples. And so they needed, if they conquer something, then they don't just want to destroy everything. They want to occupy that land and those people. So Nebuchadnezzar was in constant need of people that could learn the language of the people that they just conquered, so that they could have a government under the umbrella of Babylon. And so that his empire would continue to expand wherever there's another city and there's more gold and people under the king, he will expand, and he needs people like Daniel, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. There was a whole group of presidents under Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel chapter 5 talks about that. And Daniel was over those presidents, and then Nebuchadnezzar was over Daniel. So they conquered these lands, and they put these men in place to run this kingdom. Now, in doing that, Jerusalem just happens to be in the way, and happens to be the kingdom of Judah at that time. Judah and Israel, we've spent many classes talking about the division and then the coming back together. But they basically are the same at this point. The kingdom of Israel, the kingdom of Judah. They were split at one time. Right now, they are together. Now, Ezekiel was taken in the first group. Daniel was taken. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were taken, and they were given pretty good positions, even though they were captives and technically slaves, sort of like Joseph in Genesis. He was a slave, I mean, just nobody, nothing, possessed and owned by Potiphar, and yet because of his ability, his brain matter, his ability to govern, Potiphar put him in the right place, and eventually he got a position, high position in government, so high that Pharaoh said, look, you need something along those lines, go to Joseph, and whatever he tells you, you do it, obey Joseph. Daniel Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had a similar position in Babylon, even though they were in captivity. Now, they were in captivity for 70 years. One of the things that happened was that God said it's going to be 70 years because you didn't keep the land Sabbaths. Sabbath is a sign between Israel and God. Ezekiel chapter 20 and Exodus chapter 31. And so because you didn't do that, we're going to let the land of Israel lie fallow, so that the land, can observe the Sabbaths that I, God, instituted back in Leviticus and Deuteronomy. So Jeremiah is left. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are taken. Ezekiel is taken. Then the second time Nebuchadnezzar sends an army, the second time, and they take the skilled workers, the carpenters, the metal workers, the artificers, the ones that could make things out of gold and silver. And he needed them to occupy, continue to build and spread his kingdom. So they were skilled workers, blue-collar workers. Then he left some people behind. And then the third time he comes, and you just read it, he took the lower class people just as laborers or as slaves, and he made some of the people that he's going to leave to occupy Jerusalem. They're poor, they're farmers, they can raise a crop, they can pick fruit, things like that. That's the lowest class of society there. He leaves them there so that he can occupy the country of Judah, and he puts all the kings are taken away or killed, and he leaves Gedaliah as sort of like a city manager or a governor, I think the Bible calls him. So he's ruling, but he's not really a king, and he doesn't last long because nobody likes him. So Jerusalem is still occupied, but there's nobody there that knows anything about government. Everything is destroyed. You're living in a tent or just a shack of some sort. So there's nothing much going on in Jerusalem. The activity is in Babylon. Ezekiel, the whole book of Ezekiel, talks about Ezekiel going back and forth from Babylon to Jerusalem, Jerusalem to Babylon. Now, that's not an easy trip. It's probably 4 to 6 months by foot or camel. Nothing to indicate he had a camel. It's hot, it's through the desert, it's dangerous. The probability is that Ezekiel was transported miraculously because he shows up in the spirit here and he shows up in the spirit in Babylon. He's going back and forth. Like I said, you're talking about months if you're walking or taking a camel journey. And so in the New Testament, you've got Philip, who in Acts chapter 8 led that Ethiopian eunuch to the Lord. And then it said Philip was taken and he shows up in another place. Well, that's supernatural transportation, pretty common in the Bible, very uncommon with us. Jeremiah enjoyed special transportation because he preached in all the places of the world to the kings. God gave him the language. God gave him the audience of the kings of the world in chapter 25. And he went to every nation upon the face of the earth. Try that. Even in the existing world of Jeremiah's time, try traveling to all those nations. He had supernatural travel abilities, I believe it. Paul had supernatural travel abilities. He went to heaven and saw what was up there and came back and told us, and he said, you won't believe it. So there's not really any words for me to express it because it's not anything like this world. Well, if it's not anything like this world, how could you describe it? I would say, well, a tree, you know what a tree is? Well, I would say a valley, you know what a valley, it's not like that in heaven. And so it's described pretty well in Revelation chapter 21. Yeah. But Paul said there's no words to describe what awaits those that love God. All right, now Jeremiah, he told of the destruction of the city, but he also told of the sorrow of the people. And look in... Here's Babylon destroying Jerusalem. But look in chapter 1 of Lamentations and verse 6. And from the daughter of Zion, all her beauty is departed. Her princes are become like harts, deer, if you will. that find no pasture, and they are gone without strength before the pursuer. Look in verse 12. Is it nothing to you, all ye that pass by? Behold, and see if there be any sorrow like unto my sorrow, which is done unto me, wherewith the Lord hath afflicted me in the day of his fierce anger. Jeremiah takes it personally. He warned them for all of his life. His life and his ministry continued from through 4 kings. In Jeremiah chapter 1, he tells us to whom the word of the Lord came in the days of Josiah, Ammon, kings of Judah, unto the days of Jehoiakim and Josiah and Zedekiah, all the way to the end. Now, none of us in this room can really imagine the terrible pain and heartache that was suffered by the people that watched this, and specifically Jeremiah. Jerusalem was a fabulous city in its day before it was destroyed. The temple was, like I said, one of the most magnificent buildings in all the world. Jeremiah ministered there almost all of his life, and he watched it be destroyed, not only physically, but also emotionally. He watched the people lose their spirituality. He watched them lose their morality. And he watched kings. He watched Manasseh carry his firstborn son up the steps of the idol Molech and dump it in the fire in his arms. And he's the king. It's incredible what Jeremiah saw. Now, I'm not to be compared with Jeremiah in about 1,000 different ways. But on a small scale, I'm watching through the news, I'm watching my country, the United States of America, be destroyed. I don't pay much attention to your news. First of all, it doesn't pertain to me. I don't know the politics involved like I know my country. I go back to 1945 with my country. I grew up in the 50s, and so I have a history of that, and it was a decent country. If you want to call it a Christian country, in many respects, it was no longer. We read this morning, this is just tip of the iceberg, but we read this morning about a huge satanic church being built in New Mexico, and they want to, I can't hardly believe it. They want to be the church of Satan that offers rituals, satanic religious rituals for abortion. What's that mean? That means if you're a young lady and you're with child, and you want to give that child to the devil, and you want to have a ceremony, and you want to have a religious observance of your abortion, that's now available to you. Wonderful. Yes. Send all your pregnant teenage girls over to the United States so they can experience that. Wonderful thing.
Is it now finished? The church of Satan is already existing?
No, they're just now building it. But see...
They are in the process of building it.
I'm sorry? Who said what?
Are they in the process of building it yet?
Yes, they're in the process of building it. But see, I mean, when I grew up in America and I was, say, 10 years old, I still didn't know anything about female anatomy or sexual relations. Thank God I didn't. That's the best way to go. I can testify to that. But if you'd have said the word trans or transgender or even homosexuality, now we know it's sodomy. But if you'd have talked to me about a girl wanting to be a boy or a boy wanting to be a girl, or guys getting together sexually, or girls getting together sexually, or abortion, what is abortion? And then growing up, I pastored in Florida, I pastored in Alabama, I've been an evangelist in the States. And you know, one of the basic rules in the pulpit, and you guys have been in the pulpit, some of you, one of the basic rules is you just don't talk about sex. And I agree. But you can't get away with that anymore. If you're a pastor and you've got teens, you better talk to them, because the world sure is talking to them. And if you've got young people in your church and they're in college, you better tell them the truth about what God said about sexuality. And so you have to say, okay, we're going to have I'm not talking about details or demonstrations, of course. We haven't gone that far, but maybe next year. But you better talk to them, because the world sure is talking to them. Now last night, right here, I had about, 18 teenagers in Bible study. We have it Monday night, we have it Thursday night. If you'd like to come, that's fine, at 6 o'clock. But we have it every Monday and every Thursday, and we're in-depth Bible study with teenagers. But I can no longer ignore that subject. It's just terrible. But like I said, when I was a teenager, when you mention those terms or that subject, I'm a total blank. Thank God for ignorance.
But now.
Really, but now we have to deal with it. If you're a parent, you have to talk straight to your kids. If you're a pastor, you've got to talk straight to them, because the world sure is doing that. Okay, that's enough on that subject. Jeremiah, look in chapter 1 and verse 18. The whole book, 5 chapters in Lamentations, and the entire book is on either physical destruction or the moral degradation or the emotional distress of the ruination of the nation of Israel. In verse 18, chapter 1, the Lord is righteous, for I have rebelled against his commandment. Hear, I pray you, all people, and behold my sorrow, my virgins and my young men are gone into captivity. Here, Jeremiah, like I told you, he's taking it personally. So in many of the things that he writes, he says I or me, and he's referring to Jerusalem. So he's saying this happened to me, as if Jerusalem could write it. Do you understand that? He's speaking in the first person as if he were Jerusalem. My young men are gone, my virgins, my young men are gone into captivity. Exactly what we're talking about right now, about you have to deal with it, because the world is taking the young men and the young virgins captive. It's in some schools in the United States, it is no longer a virtue. It's been this way for a long time. If you're a virgin, male or female, it's no longer a virgin. It's an embarrassment. You're what? You mean you never? You mean you've never been with a guy? You never been with a girl? What are you, a freak? I mean, it's an embarrassment, and it's hard to withstand. Some of our teens, we take them down to LaSalle College for music lessons. They're very skilled in violin, and my wife, thank God for my wife, she goes with them. And they're not college age yet. They're still, some of them 12, 13, 15. But we've secured advanced lessons in violin and music. Well, the rest of the kids in the classroom are college. So they're adults, they're over 18. And the professor is a worldly, unsaved Italian man that came here to start an orchestra and to teach at LaSalle College. So you can't really expect the same standard of morality or cleanliness or spiritual respect for God. He doesn't. He's a worldly man. We can't go down there and tell him what to say and tell him what. That's not our place. We're invading their world. Now, if they came to church here, then if he said or did or something, you know, if he lit up a cigarette in church, I'm just guessing now. If he said, yeah, you're blankety blank, blank, right, you know, if he just made a scene of it, well, he's invaded our space now. I could control that. But the only thing we can do with these young people that go down there is watch and observe, and if something happens, we can take our kids out, but we can't direct what they do or what they don't do. And so my wife, she loves these young people, so do I, but she sticks with them. And if any of them are going to pursue a musical career or musical education, and they need to go to LaSalle College to get a degree for that, my wife keeps saying, if they ever go to college there, I'm going to go and sit in the class with them. You know? Just because, and here we're trying to train them for the day when not their parents and not their pastor and his wife are making those morality decisions. The day is fast coming when they are going to have to fight that battle themselves. No parent likes that, to see that day approach, but it happens. It happened with all of us. Now me, I mean, you could hardly persuade me to do something immoral. I've been saved for 59 years now. I've been in the ministry over 50 years. You could hardly do that. I'm strong in the Lord, and I only stay strong because I stay in this Bible.
Amen.
It's not that I was born strong and I am strong and nothing could ever happen to me. If I close this book and just don't turn back and leave the ministry, I could be in bed with a whore, you know, tonight. I could be drunk tonight. But I've strengthened myself. Well, that's what we're trying to do with these young people. But in Jeremiah's day, he had no pastors, no spiritual leadership except himself. Well, there were several million people in Jerusalem, and Jeremiah can't minister to them all and strengthen them all. Besides, the majority didn't want that. In fact, they came to him in chapter 42 and said, well, we've got all these problems with Babylon now. What do we do? What do we do? Jeremiah, please go and find out what God's will is for our lives. So Jeremiah went, he found out, he came back, he told them, and they said, we ain't listening to you. You're lying. You're lying. That isn't from God. And we're going to go our own way. Well, there's not much you can do with somebody like that. I mean, you can have the best church service in the world, best music, best preaching. If they won't listen, there's not much you can do for them. So that's Jeremiah's condition. And he continued to watch the moral and spiritual deterioration in his favored city, his favorite city. And so they said, the people of Jeremiah's day, they said, not only are we not going to follow God's will, we're going to take you with us. So they said, what do we do? And Jeremiah came back to them and he said, whatever you do, don't go to Egypt. Don't go to Egypt. Well, they said, we're going to Egypt. And not only are we going to Egypt, we're going to take you with us. Well, they literally took him captive and took him to Egypt. And as far as we know, he died in Egypt. Sad day. Not only did he watch all of this happen, the destruction of morality and emotional distress among the people in Jerusalem, they took him with them in disobedience to the Lord. And he was dragged along with them. Look in chapter 2 of Lamentations and look in verse 14. Here's further spiritual deterioration. Thy prophets have seen vain and foolish things for thee, and they have not discovered thine iniquity to turn away thy captivity, but have seen for thee false burdens and causes of banishment. That's a condition of the preachers in Jeremiah's day. Like I said, he had no help. He had no shepherds to spiritually guide the people. Same situation in America. You've got Benny Hinn, and you've got Joel Osteen, and you've got these joke healers, and
joke healers.
Fake healers. And Joel Osteen, you'll never hear him preach against sin. You'll never hear him mention hell. You'll never hear him ever refer to sodomy or homosexuality or abortion. He just skirts the surface of nice things. The Bible calls it tickling the ear. And keep those contributions coming in. Yes. I think he takes in $6 million a week or something. Some report said. So that's the condition of the prophets in America. Look in Lamentations chapter 2 and verse 20. Here it got so bad, nobody at this table can even digest this thought. You can't even think of this thought. In verse 20, behold, O Lord, and consider to whom thou hast done this. Shall the women eat their fruit, and children of a span long? Shall the priest and the prophet be slain in the sanctuary of the Lord? Well, Jeremiah couldn't imagine that. A span long. Okay, that's a span right there. From the tip of your finger to the tip of your thumb. That's a baby. That's an infant. That is the size of a premature child that weighs maybe 14 ounces. And you know what they're doing? They're killing them and eating. We can't imagine it. We don't want to imagine it. They're doing it today. China has products on the shelf in the grocery store that contain fetal tissue.
Fetal tissue.
That's a span long. That's fetal tissue. They take a baby that big and they take and use their organs. In fact, here's something you never heard of. I never heard of before this year. There is a drug that's called adrenochrome. You know, you have adrenal glands. If you're an athlete and you run and you your adrenal glands kick in. It gives you a spurt of energy, a second wind, they call it. Well, the adrenal glands, can't believe I'm talking to you about this. The adrenal glands of a infant a span long has in it adrenochrome, and that is a drug. That is the most expensive drug in the entire world, because guess what you have to do? You have to kill that baby to get the adrenaline from a child, an infant child. Listen to this, I know what I'm talking about. But that child only produces that adrenochrome under most violent conditions. In other words, if I were to get in a fight with you, your adrenal glands would kick in to defend yourself, and you might have a little more extra energy and strength than you normally would have. Same thing happens in an infant. And so during the abortion, which an infant is literally, they take a vacuum cleaner, not something you'd clean your house with, but it's the same thing, and they suck that baby out of the womb piece by piece, tearing the body to bits. And during that time, that adrenal gland kicks in and produces the adrenochrome, that drug, and they take that and
preserve it.
They preserve it, but the people that want that they're the richest people in the world. They're in Hollywood. They are in the World Economic Forum, WEF, and they buy that. Now look, they take that, and once you take that, I don't know how you take it. I don't want to know. I'm not going to experience it. But once you take it, it gives you a supercharge of sexual drive. And it's almost insatiable. You cannot control yourself. So that's what all the children that are disappearing, the human trafficking, the kids are used, the kids that are stolen, taken off the street. It happened right here in Lumbia. We're not talking about something in Arizona, even though it happens there too. But we had a white man from Australia that was enticing children to come to the van right here, just 5 years ago, 7 or 8 years ago. And then he would take the kids and then he would sell them on the market, the child market. He was in jail. When I had my jail ministry before the pandemic, I saw him in the jail right there, 1 kilometer away. Yeah. So we're not talking about something on Mars. We're talking about something that's happening right here. And they take those children and use them as sex slaves for these people that are taking this adrenochrome, and they get hyped up so much that they can't control themselves, and they use those children as sex toys, and it's happening today. But there's nothing new about this. They were doing the same thing when they offered their children to the idol Moloch, and they were taking those children and killing them and using them for the same. There's nothing new under the sun. The wisest man in the world that ever lived said there's nothing new under the sun. Yeah. So they're doing the same thing here, and the same lamentation that I'm expressing to you here today was expressed by Jeremiah 2,600 years ago. Okay, look in Lamentations chapter 4. There's starvation, famine. Look in verse 4. Lamentations 4:4, the tongue of the suckling child cleaveth to the roof of his mouth for thirst, and the young children ask bread, and no man breaketh it unto them. Look back, keep your finger here, because we'll come back. But look back in 2 Kings chapter 6. 2 Kings 6. 2 Kings 6. Now, brother, we're not always this dramatic or terrible. We've studied the entire Bible, but it just happens today that we're studying the captivity and the siege of Jerusalem. In 2 Kings chapter 6 and verse 26, I believe, 28. 2 Kings 6:28. And the king said unto her, this is history here, what aileth thee? And she answered, this woman said unto me, give thy son, that we may eat him today, and we will eat my son tomorrow. So we boiled my son. Come on now. Yeah, that's right. And did eat him. And I said unto her on the next day, give thy son, that we may eat him. And she hath hid her son. And it came to pass when the king heard the words of the woman, that he rent his clothes, and he passed by upon the wall. And the people looked, and behold, that he had sackcloth within his flesh, upon his flesh. Then he said, God, so do so, and more also to me, if the head of Elisha, the son of Shaphat, shall stand upon him this day. Here's the king. And these women come to him. And they said, look, we're all starved to death, right? Yeah. Okay, well, this woman and I made an agreement. We both have young children. And we made an agreement that I would give mine today, and we'd boil him and eat him today. And we did, and we survived. But now it's time for her to give her son. She's hid the kid. Now you're the king. You make her give her son so that we can have something to eat today. And the king, he said, what am I supposed to do? It actually happened. It happened in Lamentations, in the last days of Jerusalem. It happened during the Holocaust in 1943, and it's going to happen again in the tribulation time.
Because of the extreme, is that things happen because of the extreme situation of famine?
Yes, but famine due to sin. You got to get the origin. Got to get the origin.
Carnivorous.
Now looking back in Lamentations in chapter 4, the same thing happens. Chapter 4 and verse 9. They that be slain with the sword are better than they that are slain, that be slain with hunger. For these pine away, stricken through for want of the fruit of the land. The hands of the pitiful women have sodden their own children, boiled like a pot of beans. Like you boil a chicken and make soup. They did their child that way. Exactly correct. It's happening today. They were their meat in the destruction of the daughter of my people. Now, okay, now,
Why do we think that God permits it to happen as part of punishment or whatever?
I don't mean to embarrass you at all, but that's a question that the world asks, disdaining the Lord, putting the Lord down. The Lord permits things because we choose to do them. We have a free will. We're not Calvinists. We have a free will. We can do what we want. And the same people that would say, well, why would God allow that?
Yep.
I would ask them, why does God allow you to do the sinful things that you do? And if God disallowed you to do it, you'd be mad at God. I have a right. I can fornicate if I want. I can commit adultery. It's me. It's my body. Well, isn't adultery as bad as killing your child, boiling your son? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. There's degrees of sin for punishment, but there's no degrees of sin. Sin is sin. A little white lie and murder are on the same plane. The punishment is capital punishment. You die. All liars shall have their part in a lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. Revelation 8:20 or 28. And the same person that would say, well, why would God allow that? Because God allows your sin. And if he disallowed your sin, you'd get mad at God. Same thing right here. Now, Ezekiel's ministry is reporting. Okay, let me give you this scenario here. 606 BC. Nebuchadnezzar comes from Babylon and puts Judah under siege. He besieges the city. He surrounds the city and won't, just starving the people to death for 11 years. And then the people are ready to be overtaken by Nebuchadnezzar. And then he moves in and does this destruction. He takes the people in 3 different groups. We talked about that. The brains, the skilled laborers, and the poor people. Then Ezekiel is taken, it looks to be in the first group, because his job as a prophet is to go back and forth between Jerusalem and Babylon and report what's going on. He's like a newspaper reporter, so to speak. And he's letting the people that went in the early days of captivity, they are in Babylon, they don't know what's going on with their friends and relatives and whoever's left in the second and third group that haven't been taken captive yet. They don't know what's going on. So Ezekiel goes in between them and brings back reports of what's going on. So Ezekiel, look in Ezekiel chapter 1 and verse 3. The word of the Lord came expressly unto Ezekiel the priest. It came particularly, specifically, if you know any of these words, expressly. And he's reporting to the people in Babylon what the people in Jerusalem are doing now. He's sort of like a reporter to let them know. And Ezekiel has a strange ministry in that he uses object lessons. I love to use object lessons when I preach. Whenever it'll fit. I use pictures when I preach as well, like we're doing here tonight, but I do that in church all the time. And I use object lessons. There's a great picture. You ought to frame it, put it in your living room. Wonderful picture. Notice the chaos. Notice the confusion. Notice the people that are they've just gone crazy. They're mad with violence. And that's when Nebuchadnezzar came in and took charge of Jerusalem. Okay, I was talking about Ezekiel. Ezekiel goes on the street preacher, friend of mine. And he goes there and he lies on his side and has an object lesson. He has soldiers, little miniature soldiers. He has the wall of Jerusalem, and the soldiers are besieging. They're keeping supplies from coming in and people escaping. And he's playing this out. He really, literally lying on his side and demonstrating this as he preaches on the street in Babylon or the surrounding areas there. And then he takes some of his hair another day, and he lies on his side for so many days for Judah and then so many days for Israel, and he's preaching while he's doing this. He's demonstrating. You know what it is the daily newspaper for the people that have been taken already to Babylon, to let them know what's going on in their hometown Jerusalem. And then another day he takes some of his hair and he lays it and he parts it, and he takes a third of the hairs, puts them over here, takes a third of the hairs and puts them over there. So he's got 3 piles of the hair, and he takes some and he chops them up. That's what's happening in Jerusalem with your friends and relatives and neighbors, with the government. He takes some of it and he burns it. Burning hair stinks very bad. And the people of the city are coming and watching and looking and paying attention. Why? Because he's giving them an object lesson of what's taking place in their hometown. And then he takes a third of the hair and he throws it up in the air and the wind catches it. Well, that's the inhabitants. Some of them escaped, some of them went. Like we said, they took Jeremiah to Egypt, thinking that they were getting away with something, so he throws it up in the air and it blows away. What's all that about? If you don't know the history, if you haven't read Jeremiah, Lamentations, and then Ezekiel, you'll never figure it out. But Ezekiel is after the siege. He's been taken and he goes back and forth and he lets them know what's going on physically and spiritually and morally in Jerusalem. Look in chapter 8. Look in chapter 8. And it came to pass in the 6th year, in the 6th month, the 5th day of the month, as I sat in mine house, and the elders of Judah sat before me, that the hand of the Lord fell there upon me, and I beheld, and lo, a likeness as the appearance of fire, from the appearance of his loins, even downward fire, and from his loins even upward, as the appearance of brightness of the color of amber. And he put forth the form of an hand, and took me by a lock of mine head, and the Spirit lifted me up between earth and heaven, and brought me in the visions of God to Jerusalem, to the door of the inner gate that looketh toward the north, there where was the seat of the image of jealousy, which provoketh to jealousy. And behold, the glory of the Lord, glory of the God of Israel was there, according to the vision that I saw in the plain. Then said he unto me, Son of man, lift up thine eyes now the way toward the north. So I lifted up mine eyes the way toward the north, and behold, northward at the gate of the altar there this image of jealousy in the entry. Here is an idol It could be of Baal, could be of Ashtaroth, whatever, an idol. He said, verse 6, he said, furthermore unto me, Son of man, seest thou what they do, even in the great abominations that the house of Israel committeth here? And I should go far off from my sanctuary, but turn thee yet again, and thou shalt see greater abominations. And he brought me to the door of the court, and when I looked, behold, an hole in the wall. Then said he unto me, Son of man, dig now in the wall. And when I digged in the wall, behold, a door. And he said unto me, Go in, and behold, the wicked, watch it, wicked abominations that they do here. Here's Ezekiel, who has a home in Babylon because he was carried away first. He's been transported supernaturally back to Jerusalem. God directs him to an underground basement where the leaders that were left in Jerusalem, the leaders are basically watching television. They're casting images on the wall and worshiping these gods. We have television today. There's nothing new under the sun. They're casting these images on the wall. Verse 10, So I went in and saw, and behold, every form of creeping things and abominable beasts and all the idols of the house of Israel portrayed upon the wall round about. And there stood before me 70 men of the ancients of the house of Israel, and in the midst of them stood Jehazaniah, the son of Shaphan, with every man his censer in his hand, and a thick cloud of incense went up. You know what they're having is a seance. They're having a satanic, demon-possessed worship service of all of the images, and they're portraying them on the wall. Don't ask me how. Maybe they're drawing them. Maybe they had something supernatural to shoot. Maybe even the shadow. We do funny things with a light here and a wall there, and we make images. We make a little dog bark and make a little rabbit, things like that. Could have been that. I don't know what it was. But today it would be television. You looking at an image, and you don't have to watch television long to where an idol will come up of some sort. I haven't had television in my home for 40 years, so I don't know what I'm talking about there, and I'm glad. Thank God for ignorance. But I know what it was from my former days. Okay, so this is what's going on. Ezekiel goes back to Babylon, and he says, let me tell you what's going on. And he names these guys, Jehazaniah, son of Shaphan, and he's in his home in Babylon. And he says, hey, you remember Jehazaniah? Sure, I know who he is. Okay, he's included in this.
Yes.
Oh my. And the son of Shaphan was there too. And they're going into this room, and they're having this seance, and they're worshiping Satan, bowing down to Baal and Ashtaroth, gods of sexual reproduction, if you study history. And they're doing this. And you may tell you the address in Jerusalem. And he said, you know where that big house is on the corner or whatever? In the basement of that house. I was in that house, and these guys are in there doing this. And the people in Babylon, oh my, we can't hardly believe our country has come to this. That's what I'm doing. 12,000 miles away from the United States, I'm watching imagery on the news on my cell phone, and I'm watching what they're doing in my country. And the people in Babylon, they don't understand why God brought all of this destruction upon Jerusalem. That was our town. We loved God, and some of them did. And they said, the temple, we went to the temple. We worshiped in the temple. And some of them did. And so Ezekiel's coming back and saying, yeah, you went to the temple. Temple's no more. There's no place to sacrifice and get forgiveness of your sins. And this is the spiritual condition of Jerusalem today. He's telling them in Babylon, this is what they're doing. And that's why God allowed Jerusalem to be destroyed. Because of your ancestors' sins and your people that you know of today, what they're doing. Of course they didn't tell you. Of course they didn't put it in the newspaper. But that's what's going on. You guys never heard what I told you about adrenochrome and sex trafficking and little children and all that stuff. You never. I told you. You're going the same way. You mean they actually do that? Yeah. Who's the famous actor that's involved in that? You've seen films by him. If you saw the Passion, no, that's not the same guy. Sorry. Tom. Who?
Shepherd? Shepherd?
No. It doesn't matter. If you saw his picture, you'd say, oh yeah, I know him. Well, he's involved in that adrenochrome, sex trafficking, little children, abusing them. They have a way to get on the internet, and you order a child like you order a pizza, and it's all in word likenesses. You know, if I order a pizza, I'd say I want pepperoni, I want double cheese, this kind of stuff. All those things mean something in your desire for a child for perverted purposes. So you order, and it's all hidden. So it looks like, if you check up on them, it looks like, well, I just ordered a pizza. But they ordered a child. They want a boy, they want a certain age, they want them to be white or Filipino or whatever. And you order that child, and they fill that order. If you say, I want a Filipino little girl, 5 years old, they'll come here and entice a girl into a van, take her and ship her out to wherever you are, and in return they get several $100,000 or $1 million or whatever you ordered, and it's all done in code like you order a pizza. Incredible. Well, that's what happened in the destruction of Jerusalem, and I've read an awful lot about it, studied an awful lot about it, and so if you got any questions, maybe I could come close to answering or pointing you to a place where you could find an answer. But like I said, now, really, this is not the subject of the class every week. You can ask, these guys have been with me 11 years, and we've studied everything from Genesis to Revelation and back again. And right now we just came to an end of studying. The subject was the stupidity of kings. And we went through all the kings of Judah and picked out the stupid things that they did. The Bible says in Revelation, we are kings and priests. So the principle was, this king did this stupid thing, and it resulted in him suffering this and that. So don't do that stupid thing, because you too are a king, and then you won't reap that fruit from those kings that did stupidly. All right, anything else? Anything need to be prayed for? Your lunch, I believe, is ready, and it's wonderful to have each and every one of you, and if I can help you in any way, please call me. Yeah. Heavenly Father, thank you for these truths, as painful as they are to study, and help us, Lord, to realize that these things are going on today. There's nothing new under the sun, And help us, Lord, to speak to the people that we minister to, whether that be our family or a church or a neighbor. And if we have to talk about these ugly things, sexual things, Lord, with teenagers or whatever, help us to do it with great wisdom and great discretion. And be with Brother Pastor Paul Dewey and give him everything that he needs to do to take care of the funeral and the burial of his wife this week, Lord. We love you. We love your word. We love your people. We love church. We love hymns. We love good music. And thank you for all of it here on this property. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.